Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. A very special morning that we've all been waiting for. It comes once in a while, but be that as it may, we really appreciate the moment and the time that we've been afforded to us to get this going. Okay, so as I said, I'm a driver and doing all sort of things. It's just like being a producer and the radio talk host or the TV host at the same time. You're driving everything, but it's all happening very well. A very special morning, as mentioned, Thursday, the 5th of August. This is the 7th Africa Brand Summit monthly webinar, which was supposed to be held last month. But because we needed to accommodate Professor Lumumba, who's on overseas business trip, we shifted it to today. Before we start, I think it's important that we outline the reasons why we're doing this. Africa Brand Summit monthly webinar. We've looked at a number of things that are happening in and around us. And we noticed that as the world emerges from the deep pandemic chaos, and each country and continent likewise define its own new global appeal. So as Africa, we continue to have our own challenges cut out for us, both human and economic challenges that we have. So the Brand Summit interrogates these challenges through various forms of engagement. Featuring large is what we do on the monthly basis, just to bring everybody up to speed, to make people understand what we're going through as a continent. But over and above that, looking at human-related issues, look at economic issues that affect us equally. As a brief about the Brand Summit, it is in its fourth year, sorry. It was established in the late 2016 and launched in May 2018 in Cape Town, South Africa. And then the first event took place in 2019, hosted in Sandton, Johannesburg, and then the 2020 in Cape Town. So this is the first, this was the first ever hybrid we had last year because of COVID-19. So far we've had a lot of interventions, and we were very delighted that one of the first summit that we had, we were looking at maximum 50 people attending live, and we had over 420 others streaming in to participate in the programs that we run as Africa Brand Summit in partnership with the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa and the PLO Lumumba Foundation. And since then, we've had other partners coming on board and joining us, and we're very delighted that this is happening and continues to impact on our lives. So for today's discussion, a very interesting discussion indeed that we really need to interrogate. We are joined by a number of speakers. We've got Mr. Rob Hersov, and we've got Phumlani Majozi, who will facilitate the session, sort of moderate it. And we'd like to first extend a hearty apology on behalf of Professor PLO Lumumba, who is unable to attend because of business commitment, but he has sent us a recording of his presentation. We will play it for you in order to catch up on the topic. But as we do that, please note that the recording did not come out very well, but I just ask you to be patient and listen to what he has to say. Make notes as we go along, because immediately after that, we will bring in Mr. Majozi, who will then lay the rules for today, and then Rob will then take over from there, obviously led by Mr. Majozi. Only at the end of the program, Mr. Moeng, who is the convener of the Africa Brand Summit, will also weigh in on the topics, and we will also outline the future topics for this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this. Please note that this is also streamed live on the PRISA Facebook. And once we're done with this program, it will be uploaded to the Africa Brand Summit website, which is very straightforward. It's africabrandsummit.co. So very, very, very straightforward. But we will keep informing you of all the developments. If you'd like to make a comment or so, you can make use of the chat when we will access that. And as we go through the program, we will interact with you likewise. This moment, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share Professor Lumumba's video outlining the topical issue that we're talking about today, we're talking about China. It all sounds good and we're comfortable when we say, hey, how you doing, my China? Now we are faced with the China that we have to deal with, a very, very big challenge for all of us in the continent. But as we go through looking at the video and looking at the challenges, one of the most important things that we have to look at discussing this topic is that something very interesting we read during the week, that for us to conquer and win this battle on China and understand it better. There was a very interesting article by the former minister of Australia, Mr. Kevin Rudd, who said countries should unite against China's growing economic and geopolitical cohesion, or risk of being singled out and punished by Beijing. So it is a very serious matter we're dealing with, but be that as it may, together we can conquer. Let's listen to what Professor Lumumba has to say about this topic, ladies and gentlemen. Please make notes as we go along, and so that you'll be able to weigh in on the discussions further on. Just be patient as I load the video. President Moeng, sorry to put you on the spot while I'm just trying to figure out to get the video uploaded. May I ask you just to maybe just a word of welcome to the delegates, to the guests?
Yeah, I think I suspect you forgot to introduce our other speaker from Uganda. I'm not sure if she's here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Madam Sarah Kajingo. Okay.
Is she here?
She's not yet on.
Okay, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm not sure. I'm really delighted to be here. As you can see, I'm trying to pull back from this thing. Victor has been doing such a great job hosting these monthly discussions, and I feel that my face tends to be so controversial out there in South Africa. It's best that it's not part of these discussions anymore, so that I don't want to become the face of the Africa Brand Summit because it's too important. It's too big for me on my own. But I'm always happy to see the kind of interest that's been shown in it as it grows. Victor said last month we had so many people connecting from around the world. We had people from a number of African embassies based in Washington, D.C., also connecting, and Africans in the diaspora. It was quite humbling, really, really humbling. So I'm delighted that we can continue to host these events for the month, and it really keeps the conversations going. What he didn't tell you is that we're not going to host the normal 2-day summit in 2021, but we're hoping to host one next year. But we will host the Africa Brand Summit Gala Awards dinner at the end of this year. We're still looking for sponsors for it, but the events, the Gala Awards dinner will happen. It's always been the highlight of the Africa Brand Summit from the time we started in 2018. People just love to be acknowledged for the good things they do for Africa. And I think that it would be bad for us not to acknowledge those people who continue to do awesome things in Africa across the continent, despite the challenges. And many of them don't do them so that they become famous. They do them because it's just the right thing to do, because they want to play their part in making Africa stand apart and lead. And I think that Africa has a potential to lead where it must, but we just need leadership. This is what we lack, leadership. We do not have the kind of leadership that's a visionary and that believes in Africa. I always believe that if you don't know and appreciate your own value, other people will determine your value, and it's not going to be at the level where it should be. I'll stop here. Looks like the video is ready.
Thank you so much, President Moeng. Once a president, always a president. Okay, I will play the video. Once again, I ask you to be patient, make notes as we go along. From time to time, the video lags here and there, but we will soldier on. Okay.
Consider subject
Yeah.
that important and topical. You will remember during the struggle for independence, the founding would continue to be victimized by the neo-colonial project. Of course, many did not listen to the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. The continent continues to suffer under the Berlin colonies as Anglophone, the former Portuguese countries as Lusophone, and sometimes, of course, we refer to Arabophone to refer to the countries. The net effect is not colonialists within the African continent. Hold of the continent of Africa. Surreptitiously, the former colonial powers retained their hold. Is famous for of the prophecies of Kwame Nkrumah and other freedom fighters of the day, such as Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria, Modibo Keita of Mali, Mora Moises Machel of Mozambique, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, and indeed a little later in the day, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela of South Africa. Which begs the question, Congo, Patrice Emery Lumumba. Africa is the home of numerous resources, some even dare say inexhaustible resources. And these resources have attracted different civilizations throughout the ages. And in the recent past, we have seen the emergence of China, which is a power that has emerged in the last 30 years and has been involved in Africa and continues to be involved in Africa in a manner that is worrying many. What happened is that Africa has been exploited. Indeed, it is in this context that I understand the injunctions, if you may, of Kwame Nkrumah once again, when in the 1950s and early 60s, he was famous for saying we should neither look east nor west, but we should look forward. Of course, very few people listened to Kwame Nkrumah, and he himself was a victim of the diabolical machination. Fact, of course, is that Africa has been twisting and has been twisted by these powers, and the new boy on the block is China. China has come at a time when the experiments that were undertaken by European powers and the United States of America have. Many of you will remember the attempts at continuing to control the continent. Many of you will also remember the attempts at African leaders to ensure that we reduce our independence on foreign powers. You remember the Lagos Plan of Action of 1980. You remember the Lomé agreements and the Cotonou agreements. You will remember the very purpose for the creation of the Organization of African Unity, which then transited into the African Union. You will remember the Africa Agenda 2063, which is designed to ensure that Africa goes through economic transformation. You'll remember the much more recent Africa Free Trade Area. But you will also remember the structural programs that were imposed on African countries in the 1980s. What has happened, therefore, is that in the last 30 years, the Chinese have entered into the arena. And they have entered into the arena in a manner that is very different from the obviously controlling Western economic powers and the European Union, and largely the conceptual West, if I'm to refer to them in a single term, to include Europe, the United States of America, and other affiliates such as Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And that, of course, will also include the Scandinavian countries of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. How has China? China has not pegged her so-called roads and stadia, which are visible and can be shown to the electorate to hoodwink them in retaining them in power. And what has happened is that they have given access to loans in Africa Free Trade Area. But you will also remember the struggles in a very subterranean way are beginning to influence political processes. And this is what must concern us. What is the role of China going forward? A number of books have been written in this regard. The Rise of China in Africa is one of them. And what the authors are worried about and what commentators are worried about is that the Chinese economic model is one that is specifically designed to the countries, whether if it is not in Zambia, it's in Kenya, it is in Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Chinese are getting African government to sign lopsided agreements, the net effect of which will be to ensure that these resources are held at the behest a much more resurgent United Kingdom and an equally resurgent United States of America. We never mentioned India, but it is also in the fray. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my hope that during the debate that will be undertaken this morning, you will be able to assess the impact of the involvement of China in the economic affairs of the continent of Africa. But let us warn ourselves. What we are saying is that it is important for us to evaluate the significance of Chinese engagement with African governments in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. And one of the things that must is whether Africa in latter-day colonization. These are the issues that we must deal with. And if we don't deal with them, then Africa in a few years' time will find herself in the same way as she did during the European colonization. So I urge all of you who are present here to engage yourself with the issues which are on the table. What is the impact of Chinese presence and continued engagement with African countries, knowing as we
Okay.
the president of Tanzania, rather a little earlier in 1987 by the president of Tanzania, the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, when he therefore Mwalimu was warning Africans that if we don't unite, we are going to be pawns in a political chessboard which we do not control. So ladies and gentlemen, take time to discuss these issues in a manner that will bring on the table practical solution. And have a good day.
Ladies and gentlemen, we must really apologize for this content. It was not by our own doing. It is a technical problem, but you may have just picked up a few issues on this. But what I'd like us to do, Mr. President, is I think after this conference, we will try and get a transcript of what Prof said and share it with everyone else. I think that will sit well because there's so much that came out of
even
this.
even better, we'll ask him to re-record it and we'll share it.
Re-record, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Though it may not be the same because of creativity. You know, creativity flows from the mind and from the heart. Yeah. But the few things that we picked up is that he refers to Africa as the home of resources. And it refers to Africa being exploited by China, you know, which is very, I mean, 30 years time, 30 years is not much, but in 30 years time, we've seen so much exploitation of Africa by China. And he also speak about the trust that we should have as Africans to stand firm and defend ourselves. But the article I quoted earlier on that said you cannot do this alone, you cannot fight this alone. But all the attempts are being made to control Africa as something that we need to stand together. Hence, the engagement in these discussions and the bringing in of Robert Hersov. Before I hand over to Phumlani, maybe I should make Phumlani's job easier and bring in somebody who's been in direct contact dealing with these challenges on the day-to-day basis. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Hersov he's in South Africa, will refer to you as a SASA candidate because of your age, 60, but looking very healthy. He's a South African UK entrepreneur, okay, a senior executive and private investor, currently based in Cape Town, the motherland. After 30 years in the US, Europe, and mainly in the UK, he currently serves as chairman or founder of Invest Africa, okay, and founder of African Capital Investment, chairman of Alternative Capital and founder, chairman of and CEO of S Group, 100% owner of founder, the deputy chairman of Vista Jets Advisory Board. Hersov's grandfather, very important history that we need to in order to understand who he really is that he founded Angloval, one of Southern Africa's largest mining and industrial companies, which his father Basil Hersov ran from 1973 to 2001. Rob has been a member of many public and private boards and founded his own companies in the aviation resource, media marketing, member network, and finance sectors. The one part that I would like to read, which is very interesting, and I'm glad that Rob is not going to give it to the Chinese, is that Rob also founded African Capital Investment in 2014 to build an Afro-focused investment platform. And more recently, he founded both Alt Capital Invest, a London-based international family office advisory and placement firm, which is growing rapidly, and the S Group. Now, in 2020, Rob bought Fisantekral Airport to be renamed Cape Winelands Airport and is launching a SPAC, as African Gold Acquisition Corporation, expected to go public in the NASDAQ soon. Now, Rob, you are the man. You've been in so many business, you've been doing so many things, but yet you have not fallen short and have not been captured by the Chinese. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to hand over to Phumlani Majozi, who will lead us in these discussions, taking lead and notes from what the professor had to say and what Rob is going to say after Phumlani has laid the foundation and the ground rules for today's engagement. Said that we have not been joined yet by our other speaker, Madam Sarah Kajingo from Uganda, but I am trying to contact her on the phone to see if we can still get her on board. Mr. Phumlani Majozi, over to you, Baba. Briefly, just tell us. I didn't want to go into detail and introducing you because you're the man that can do this. You're in this space. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Victor. Thanks, Victor. Ngiyabonga, Baba. So it's great to be here. And I mean, I think Rob is the right man to push back against the Chinese influence in Africa. Now, well, this is the man we're interviewing here. And he's already in the process with his work. So we are right. So basically, I'll be short here. I do a lot of sort of media work, a lot of writing. Some of you have read the stuff around the macroeconomy and politics. I'm also a senior fellow at African Liberty, which is more of think tank really focused on advancing sort of pro-market, pro-business, pro-growth policies in Africa. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. So I want to go straight here to Rob, because I think he's the most fascinating person this morning that we want to hear from. Rob, are these concerns justified? The concern that China is exploiting Africa. Kevin Rudd, that Victor mentioned, it was a very interesting comments he made not long time ago, basically advising countries to get together, right? Counter China, as regional bodies, right? As groups, instead of going alone. The sense that China is somehow, borrowing this money, it's borrowing in Africa with a purpose to control the continent, to colonize it. Are these concerns justified in this environment that we're in right now?
I think China's real issue is much more with America, Britain, Germany, Japan, and France. And Africa is a resource consumption opportunity, but also, the billion people in Africa is a great opportunity for China to sell teddy bears and plastic umbrellas and stuff we really don't need. I think more than 60% of underpants bought in South Africa are made in China. Wow. And China's just created a tsunami in Africa of cheap, not very useful goods and textiles, which has damaged our African textile business. They can produce cheaply, they can swamp Africa. In return, we send them priceless commodities and no manufacturing goods. If China was buying manufactured goods from Africa, I'd top my hat at them, but they're not. It's a one-way street. The good or mediocre news is that Africa is not really of strategic, military, and even economic importance to China. The real fight for China is against the Western countries, the free market countries, the freedom of speech countries, the democratic countries. And that's the big threat. And Africa is a sideline. I think less than 8% of China trade is with Africa. So the big game is against America. And as the American empire goes into decline, which I do believe it is, the space is being filled very rapidly by China. But for us Africans, it's a one-way street. We are being used and abused. And the issue of me fighting against China, Phumlani, I love your confidence in me. I'll take the challenge if you're with me. We've got to take Solly and Victor along with us too, though. I have never had a meeting with a Chinese corporate in Africa. It's always government to government. Really? And us entrepreneurs never have the conversation with the Chinese. It's just government to government. And we don't know what's going on at that level. And we do know the Chinese bribe. We do know the Chinese play games that the Western countries don't do anymore. I'm not sure about the French, but certainly the British and the Americans do not play that game anymore. So I just think it's not a good thing for us. We're on the back foot, and we need to get tougher on the deals we do with China, but on what they buy from us. It shouldn't just be resource.
So, I mean, I think you mentioned a word that touched me here, Rob. Being used. You use that word. We are being used by the Chinese as it fights or counters Western ideals and ideology and values. So we are being used in that process. I guess my question is, Solly has, since I've known Solly, he has on many occasions said, we as Africans need to take charge, that it is us who needs to shape the direction of the continent. I guess my question, Rob, is given that environment where we are being used by basically, one could say, global powers, right? But mostly China, as you've said. What do we do here as Africans? How do we counter this?
So there's an interesting story. I spoke to a friend of mine in Ghana, high up in the government. And he said to me, Rob, here's the frustration. There was a big bridge we really wanted to have built. And the Germans and the French were bidding to do it. And both of them would have produced a superb bridge, but it took so long, the negotiation, because we had, economic compliance that we had to do, and social this and ESG that, and it would have been 8 years to get that bridge built. The Chinese came in and said, we'll build it in less than a year. And here's the cost. The cost was lower than the Germans and the French, and 12 months was quicker than 8 years. And they did it. Now, they didn't do the job that the European companies would have done. They didn't really care about the environmental side. They really didn't. And the bridge got built, but in return, the Chinese took all sorts of liberties. They brought in all their own workers, didn't hire fellow Africans. They use and abuse the rules to get things done, but they get things done. And in Zambia, I heard a story of, the Zambians have really taken the Chinese in hand and glove. And the Chinese, if you look at the balance sheet of what they got and what they gave, it's kind of embarrassing, because they got an airport, a couple of rail stations, a lot of bus stations, a few roads, probably worth $200 million US, and they gave up $1 billion worth of resource rights. That's what's happening. The countries are getting immediate gratification on these infra projects. The politicians look like they're doing a good job, so they stand a chance of getting re-elected. But in the long term, the Chinese are rape and pillaging. And there's very little concern for the rules, whereas the Western countries do play by the rules.
Yeah, there has been this concern over the years, and that is that China tends to, what Western countries have done over the past decades was that, well, if they want to do some sort of reform or push for development in Africa, they would put up some sort of terms and conditions when it comes to human rights, when it comes to political reform, and so on and so on. And the Chinese basically are holding hands with dictators, right? People who have been accused of gross human rights, the Chinese is basically transacting with them. What does that do to Africa? What image does that bring? That kind of collaboration basically between the Chinese Communist Party and leaders who are basically mismanaging their countries.
Moise Katumbi, who was the governor of the Katanga province for a long time, who did an incredibly good job. He installed fiber lines. Every Thursday afternoon, he would walk out on the street and pick up litter. And thousands of other people would do the same. He set such a good example. And he said the Chinese would come in and commit to a mining project. And then he and his team would find hidden, warehouses of Chinese employees that had been snuck in to do the work. Mostly criminals, mostly unpaid criminals from prisons in China, sent out for slave labor, not hiring our local Africans, not treating these people properly, and no integration with the local. None at all. And it's endless what they're getting up to, but they just deal government to government, and we have no say. If Cyril Ramaphosa had not been brought in as the head of the ANC, we would have the Chinese and Cubans and God knows who else, wandering around South Africa, just taking advantage of everything. Cyril, to his credit, and I don't give him much credit, I know Solly is pretty straight talking too. Cyril at least is, looking for the best from everywhere, which is what we must do. But Phumlani, you're right. It's the dictators, it's the people, people who've been in government for 30, 40 years. They're just filling up their bank accounts. And it as a fellow African, it drives me mad. It really does make me really angry.
No, it should drive every African mad. It's just a total disgrace. Now, I want to ask you about this. In 2017, right? I think it was August 2017. The Chinese, for the first time, right? Or first time I'm not sure if it was first time globally or first time in Africa. But let me just say, in Africa, for the first time, they brought in the military, right? And they created a base, their first base in Djibouti, if I'm not mistaken, in East Africa, right? Now, the United States was very concerned about that. In fact, the US, I would say Western powers, were concerned about that, saying, well, this is now one step forward for China to basically expand militarily across the world. The arrival of the Chinese military in Africa, should we say that is going to bring us more safety? Should we be concerned from that aspect? Because I understand your views from an economic point of view, but what about security, in the sense when they say we are coming to help, to stabilize, to fight against, to help you bring peace using our military? Should we also be concerned by that?
Not yet, but it is something we need to keep in the back of our minds. So, hypothetically, let's take Tanzania as an example. Okay, I'm just making this up now. Tanzania takes billions of dollars of soft loans from the Chinese. They buy certain services. They buy certain infrastructure projects with the Chinese, make cheap because they're taking resources elsewhere. And then one day they default on the loans. I can imagine in 10 years' time, a Chinese aircraft carrier outside the port of Dar es Salaam. I really can, but not yet. If you look at, the only way to project military force today is by navies. The Navy still is the greatest way to project military force internationally. And even though China has more warships than America has way more modern aircraft carriers. And China is only really a threat to the West in the South China Sea. That's the only place right now where, the West are fronting up with China and China fronting up with the West and towards Taiwan. China is no threat whatsoever in the rest of the world. They don't have nearly as many. I think they've got 2 battle-ready aircraft carriers. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong. And America has 15. Japan has a military that is equal to China, maybe not in numbers, but in capacity, in fighting capacity. Japan. And I would say Japan's America's biggest military ally right now, bigger than the UK, which has been not spending enough, and Germany, which always has this kind of post-Second World War, with their, if you really need us, but we're not going to project military power. France is very independent, in their military power, not as coordinated with the West. So it's really America and Japan with lots of smaller allies, way stronger than China, way stronger than China. So,
for now. Maybe in future that may change, we don't know. Yeah.
But it gives me comfort, because otherwise you would see Chinese projecting real military power to the African coast and saying, whichever country, you're not paying back your loans, we're sending in the military, and they will, but not yet.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I'm very curious.
Yeah, you
I can't hold myself back. Rob, do you think that, I'm tired of playing victim and of being a victim, because I'm not a victim. In Africa, we've professionalized the art of playing victim to everything else. We are victims to colonialism, to apartheid, to white monopoly capital, and this and that. But surely nobody can do the things they do in Africa, including China, without the connivance, without the enabling by African leaders. I mean, and people don't want to talk about this. There are reports that even during slavery, there were enablers. There are people in Africa, chiefs, who sold black people to ships that took him over to the. I think we must talk about this. China gets into Africa because we have people in leadership positions in Africa who sometimes for personal gain allow China to get more than it should get from us. So they don't appreciate the value of Africa. So they give so much over to Africa for nothing. Many of them because they are broke. The thing is, you can do anything with a broke person, right? You can offer them just something little. They take it and in exchange for a lot. So what is the role of African leadership in ensuring that Africa doesn't get taken over by China?
Did you hear that, Rob?
Did I stun you?
I think he's frozen.
Rob, you can't be frozen.
Yeah, I think his network is
Oh, so that is such an okay. But Phumlani, what do you think? I mean, do you think are we always victims? Or is there a role that we can play to say, okay, we've given so much to China, no more, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, like maybe we must stop playing one-on-one against China because, as you said earlier, if we work as a group, either as regions or as a continent against China, and be clear about what is for sale and what is not for sale, maybe Africa will get a better deal from this relationship. Right now, it's not. We're not getting a better deal. It's one-on-one, and Africa just bulldozes African countries, China rather, bulldozes African countries that go one-on-one with it.
Yeah, and your question is very much valid as to who enables that. You're right. I mean, they don't come in using some, one could argue, some illegal. It's not like. No. In other words, our leaders enable this to happen, right? Yeah. So now, your question is around, should we continue blaming? No, we can't. We can't continue blaming other civilizations for what's happening in Africa 30 years after the Cold War. No, we cannot do that, right? The question is, how do we, as citizens in Africa, shape the direction of our countries and of our leaders, right? Right. And right. By the way, what Kevin Rudd is saying, which is what you shared, his idea that African, countries should respond to China or counter China as groups is what Africa should sort of put in a strategy in response to China, right? Right. Because as Rob was saying, Zambia is really the Chinese. The things that are being done by the Chinese in Zambia, they are very much disturbing, right? And people of Zambia have to respond toward that, and also the African Union, the AU as well, needs to be able to to put a strategy as to how do we push back against what we see as exploitation. But we need to be clear here. So we need to work with China. We need to work with the West.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
It's not in our continental interest to pick one side and disregard or sort of, reject the other side, right? What is in our continental interest is to work together with them, with both parties.
What happened?
Yeah, to work together with. I don't know if he didn't mute himself, Victor. So.
Okay. All right. Mr. Majozi, while you're at it, I think the biggest challenge that we have is that, as Rob mentioned, China does not deal with individuals; it deals with governments, and that is where we fall short. That is where we also need to question if will there be ever a clean government free from corruption. Because certainly when China does something with the government, there are promises made. Where do those promises or those benefits end up? Do they end up benefiting the people? Because they don't. A classic example is look at the bridge that has been recently built in Mozambique. The Chinese started building the bridge. There was a hoo-ha about them having to complete a proper environmental scan, and then that delayed. Eventually, there was a whole issue about creating jobs, and that became an issue. Chinese brought the entire team to build the bridge. And guess what? They also built their own hotel where they accommodated all the workers. Very less work given to the locals, and it is a challenge. I think
Yeah.
it's time where we have to question the 5 regional structures. SADC within SADC with 15 member states, Central, East, and North, to be the one that are putting together. But they cannot be, that cannot be left to them alone. We need the likes of Robs, we need the likes of Victors, we need the likes of Phumlanis, who will then weigh in and say, this is what we see as ordinary citizens, and we should not allow this. Over to you, Mr. Majozi.
Yeah, and so Rob, what Victor is saying is that what you see in Africa in relation to how we engage with China is that the Chinese Communist Party, and I must be clear here, we should just say the Chinese Communist Party is basically collaborating with governments without citizens on the ground being able to shape what is going on, right? As a result, it becomes difficult because the decision, and by the way, these are in many ways, these are corrupt governments that the Chinese Communist Party is dealing with, right? So what Victor is trying to say is that on the ground, the people really, they don't have much say, or they are somehow, the structures are repressing them. I guess my question, Rob, is there anything the ordinary citizens, right, on the ground, whether it's NGOs, whether it's groups, whether it's people like, Rob, Phumlani, Soli, Victor, is there anything they can do here to shape the relations between Africa and China?
I think the African Union could go a long way to having a policy paper on behalf of all African countries to say the trade is bilateral, but it needs to be equal as well. For China to dump inexpensive, unwanted products on Africa, to dump textiles and destroy our local textile manufacturing industries, to take resources in return and not to buy manufactured goods from Africa, must stop. That would be the start. And to name and shame governments that are not abiding by that. And I think it has to start at the AU.
And then now what I have noticed over the past, and this was very much in Zuma's administration, I saw a lot of leaning towards China, right? I'm speaking more about South Africa. I saw that there was more leaning toward China in the Zuma administration, right? And there was sort of demonization of some sort of the West. Even the Economist covered this and said there is some sort of immorality with South Africa's foreign policy, that there is this more approach to China and rejection and demonization of the West. You seemed earlier to be saying Cyril Ramaphosa is getting this a bit right. That's what I sense from you. Can you emphasize on that? Is that your view, that he's really sort of holding against China, or at least things aren't as what they were under Zuma?
Yes, very much so. I think he's trying to take a more balanced view, but the problem is the rot set in so badly into the ANC and into the government that, I won't mention names, but 2 very large state-owned enterprises are now run by 2 people I know. And both of them said that they, even the level beneath them are still faking invoices and backdating invoices to try and protect themselves. A buddy of mine has taken control of PRASA, Khosi Matthews, a fantastic guy. And he said that he can't even trust his own security team. He thinks they've been part of the stealing. So for Cyril to turn the ship around is very, very difficult. South African Airways was flying, Johannesburg to Beijing with 10 people on every flight. And they shouldn't even have flown that route. We're losing money every time the plane took off and landed. But they agreed that with the Chinese. It was ridiculous. So I think he's trying, but, he's just is moving so slowly. A lot of damage has been done. The good news, though, is that, Africa's not a military priority for China, and it's only a trading priority to get our resources. So let's use that leverage and bargain a lot stronger with them. It's fine that they buy the resources, but let's make it a lot more expensive for them. Let's shift the balance of power to our side.
Yeah. Soli, you want to ask
Mr. Majozi, before we lose Rob, I just want to weigh in on something very, very, very disturbing. You know, the mention of the Zuma administration, not in a bad way, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Chinese were given black status. They are equal to us, to me and Soli and to Majozi. And that led to them getting preference in getting beats and buying land and building. Do you know some of the most beautiful, most expensive, most precious properties in Johannesburg, like Blue Valley and Midstream, it's owned by Chinese.
Oh.
I didn't know
sad.
that.
That is sad.
Didn't know
It's
that.
owned by Chinese.
I want to be an
I think-
honorary Solly. Can I be an honorary Solly? He's my hero.
I think that what we don't know is how much financially indebted the ANC is to the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm very happy that Phumlani keeps mentioning the Chinese Communist Party specifically. They are, if you ask me what really scares me about South Africa, more than the ANC, which really scares me, it's that it's no longer in China's interest for the ANC to lose power. I fear that the Chinese will play a really, really dirty game, or help the ANC play a dirty game to cling to power. And I really hope I'm wrong. But the things that I see, that I hear, really scares me. But I totally also think that African leaders will need to understand the value of, if not themselves, Africa, and they don't so far. That's why they give so much of Africa, the resources that we have, for nothing. A lot of times for a little, villa in southern France, Italy, or a car, an expensive car, some money in a bank account overseas, and they allow China to get a lot more from Africa than it should get. That really scares me, and it's going to be very hard to take it back.
We've got
Mr.
the human
Majozi,
capital. Africa has the human capital to compete with any country, any nation, any population in any industry. We just need to be loosed of our bad governments. And if we release the human ingenuity in Africa, we can compete with the rest of the world in anything. I'm so positive about the people I meet every day in South Africa and in Africa. Just let us loose. Let us
Just
build.
Me too. But me too. That's why I do this project. I am every day met by awesome Africans. I mean, like the Visitemi Choirs of this world and others across in the diaspora. What Africa needs are smart negotiators at the bilateral level. Okay, or multilateral level. We don't have smart people. We need people who are so smart. Did you see how long it took between the UK and the EU for to get post Brexit? Because they were looking at little lines in those agreements. They were looking at, you can't get this, you can't get. Africans, no, it just goes over a week. The agreement is signed. We need smart people who say, but wait a minute, what's in it for Africa here? We don't have those people.
All right. Yeah. Mr. Majozi, please allow me to also be inclusive in our discussions. We are also live on Facebook. We have a guest or a delegate by Jay Bins, who says, I have experienced exactly this in Zambia and Namibia. He's agreeing with Rob that there's something that is very much happening in that space as well. And he further says the Chinese provide the infrastructure, but no employment opportunities for the locals. We do acknowledge you, Jay Bins, for all your contribution, and we appreciate that. Okay. Victor, and you further say,
I rudely have to jump. I'm so apologetic. Yeah. I just want to praise you and my beloved brother Solly for what he does, what you do, and Phumlani for you, for the continent. I mean, you really lift the spirits high, and you bring out the good in people. So thank you very much for all of this. And please excuse me for leaving that early.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Rob has to jump. He's got another commitment, last-minute urgent meeting to attend. Thank you, Rob, for your time and for your contribution. We look forward to having you in future in these discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to open the floor for other participants to weigh in and also express their views and their concern in as far as this topic is concerned. We know it is a problem, especially within our smaller countries like Lesotho, Botswana, and Eswatini. The Chinese come in and they just take over. Okay, Mr. Phumlani, you can carry on. I will do the monitoring and check who's raising a hand, who's making a comment, and point this
Yeah.
out to you. Okay.
Yes, yes. This was due to finish at 12. I don't know if that's still the plan, according to what Solly communicated with me. But I want to touch on, there's a point that was made by Tsepang. It's Tsepang basically saying that the only thing that will save us is to drastically increase intra-Africa trade. That's a good way of thinking, that to increase the trade within us, right? But also it can't continue being just the raw materials that we produce as Africa. We've got to move to services as well. We've got to move to technology, right? It's time we get into those industries strongly, because they are basically the industries of the future, right? So we need to increase trade in that aspect as well. So really, it's something that can help us than, you know, being heavily reliant to countries like China. Of course, we should continue trading with them, but, you know, increasing intra-African trade will be a very helpful way of trying to address the issue as well over the long term. So, you know, this is a challenge for Africans. I always sort of fall back to the ideas of Soli when he says it's our responsibility as Africans to shape how the world sees us and how the world deals with us, right? And I really do believe that that's the way to go forward. We can't keep on saying, who is who now coming to exploit us? Who is who now coming to colonize us, right? It's a challenge for us as Africans to fix our institutions, to fix our education, to fix our industries, right? To, you know, to do many things that should sort of lift us up and bring economic development. So it's a big challenge we need to confront. We need to confront, yeah.
There are some interesting comments there by Liv, Vaughan, and Krigan Naika. I don't know if you can see them.
Yes, I can see them. Yeah, what we need to do is stand together to raise infrastructure investment and keep the business on the continent. I think that's very obvious, and I think I agree with Liv as well. Business is key here. Business has to be the driver, right? Accountable leadership by Krigan is required to move the nation forward. We've continuously heard of the lack of funding, issue of the NPA. Should the NPA funding issue be addressed by private sector with greater impetus in order to hold our government leadership accountable? Should the NPA funding issue be addressed by the private sector? That's an interesting one. What do you think, Soli, on that question?
Well, if funding is a major issue, we understand that a lot of the people who should be pursued by the NPA are hiding inside the governing party, and the governing party will protect some people. So maybe if a funding mechanism that allowed the NPA to get money from the private sector without knowing who the funders are, so people would put money into a pot sitting over there, which is managed in a way that the ANC, so the NPA has no visibility at all, so that there's never going to be any direct influence because of those control. But what we need is an NPA. But we also, not only is it an issue of funding, it's an issue of strong leadership. I don't believe that Shamila Batohi is the kind of leader that the NPA needs right now. She's too shy. Some people are saying she's trying to be liked by too many people who are on the wrong side of the fence. That's what people are saying. I'm saying. So what we need is a leader like Tulima Donsera, you know, who's able to see right and wrong, who's able to say, this is the constitution, this is the rule of law, this is the mandate of this office that I occupy, and this is what is going to happen without fear, favor, or prejudice. But right now, I'm not sure that I see that enough on the part. They should be going after Zwelin Kiza, for instance. They're not going after Zwelin. 150 million rands were stolen. I'm saying, so Africa needs, I mean, I see somebody making a comment about the need for more intra-African trade. Of course, but Africa is not an island. Of course, we need more intra-African trade. There's no doubt about it. But as Majozi said earlier, but we also have to trade with China, with America, with Europe. We must take ideology out of it. We must trade with people. We must have relations that bring value to Africa, irrespective of what those. The minute we start saying we're going to only trade with the comrades because they supported us during apartheid, no. What's good for Africa? Let's just trade, okay? with whoever, but we must be clear that Africa benefits from those relationships. Right now, we are not. We have wrong people leading discussions about where Africa can get value because of their own narrow political agendas and ideologies, some of which date back to the Soviet era, and that's a problem.
Yeah, that's it. We have to trade with whomever we can trade with, so long as it benefits our people. And Liv is also saying that we need to restart training to focus on local expertise. I'm for that. I mean, we need to build skills, right?
Right.
And it's the skills that are in demand that we have to build. You can't just build skills, right?
Yeah.
And and it needs to be expanded, not only metropolitan areas, right? South Africa is bigger than the metropolitan areas of Cape Town and Joburg and Gqeberha, Pretoria. We are bigger than that, right? We need to expand those networks, them, uplift, upskilling people in those areas. So, I mean, that's one thing that needs to happen, and government needs to. It's not a government, and it's not only a government issue, but government and the private sector as well. You need to loop in the private sector, because these things over the long term they benefit them. That's just my opinion.
Can I just say one more thing? I think, look, I mean, we tend to navigate towards South Africa. I think that a lot of these issues affect many countries across the continent. There should be a pan-African conversation about the best ways to position Africa as a strong destination for tourism, for investments, but also to enable Africa to stand shoulder to shoulder with its peers around the world. And right now we don't, because there are too many different policies. You go to one country, they don't allow certain things. You go to another country, they allow certain things. So we're not really speaking as one. I mean, people sitting in New York think you're from Africa, it's a country, but it's not a country. So we still have a lot of work to do, not just to be able to trade with one another, but to agree on the basics of what it means for us to trade with one another, but for others also to trade with us as Africa, not as the individual African countries.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy to fall into speaking as a South African in these issues.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know, from my side, I have to jump now, Victor and Soli, also the next meeting, but I think this was very sort of interesting. I love the conversation with all of you, and I've always loved working with Africa. I mean, start with the SA Print Summit, it's Africa Print Summit, So I was there from the beginning, Soli. I think
absolutely, and I love you to bits.
Yeah,
I think you're awesome.
I've always been a loyal participant.
Yes.
So thank you all, guys. Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Majozi. We're really actually looking forward to maybe solidifying a proper partnership with you going forward, because we've been really growing. The brand is growing, and it is quite a force to be reckoned with. And we really appreciate your participation, and we look forward to having you again in the next conversation. And the next one will be quite interesting for you to participate in. Just before you go off, we will be talking about the foreign direct investment in Africa. Okay, so as to say, what will it take for foreign direct investment in Africa to be less extractive in nature and be more sustainable developmental of skills and infrastructure? And furthermore, we also want to find out how can global democratic values be guaranteed, including social justice and the realization of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we talk about these things and goals and African Union and these, it ended up being a talk shop without it being filtering down to the ordinary man on the street and how it impacts on us. So this is our next topic for the end of this month, by the way, because these are done on the monthly basis, the last Thursday of the month. So we would like to have you back, Mr. Majozi, maybe this time much more on the driver's seat or on the hot seat. Yeah.
On the hot seat. Yes.
On the hot seat.
Oh, I would like to have you on the hot seat. Great.
Yes, as long as it allows, I'll show up. Yeah, I'll show
up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we were scheduled to run from 11 till 12:30, an hour and a half. Had we had the Prof on, I know the questions would have been quite a lot for you to interact with him. But on my side, Ms. President Moeng, I'm still available up until past 11. This is the time for us to engage. Let's have a conversation. even if we bring in our own little case studies and what we know. Classic example again is that if you were to look at China and its influence on us in Africa, you look at our very own China Mall in Johannesburg, President Moeng. It's right in Johannesburg. It's vibey. It's a Chinese community, but guess who do they employ? They employ brothers from the Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nigeria, and all these places. Very less local South Africans employed in this space. Yes, we did say it's a big elephant. If we want to eat it, even if we were trying to eat it bit by bit, it's going to be very difficult because we really need the big brother, which is government, to step in. And with the current corruption and everything else that is happening, it's a very difficult thing to do. But in our own little space, let us tap our creative mind and see how can we deal with this matter. Okay, I would like to open the floor for our practitioners to comment. This is an opportunity also to get to participate. And it's also a practice ground for us as practitioners to speak our minds. As long as it's all constructive, and comments are welcome. Okay, the floor is open. I know Jay Beans has been sending lots of notes, but if you'd like to, have a word, we welcome that.
I must say quickly that John Binns is also like Majozi. He's been with this Africa Brain Summit from the beginning. In 2018, he was one of the judges in our awards. A very respected and celebrated marketing guru in Africa. He's hiding. He needs to come up and show his face and say a few words, John. So he's a great guy. Thank you, John, for being here.
Okay, it's a bit quiet, right? While John is trying to get himself, sometimes we look for the unmute bucket.
Look, I know that. Look, we agreed to finish at 1:30, but most of us, because these were last-minute changes. So if that's John.
John, yeah.
If people want to finish at 1:15, it's fine.
It's fine. We'll do that. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to run until 1:30. Those that can buy time and have an additional another cup of coffee. John, over to you. Just send your greetings to everyone else. You are muted, John. It seems like John is really battling. Maybe that's the reason why he's been sending in the notes. Okay. We still cannot hear you. Okay. All right. No, we cannot hear you, unfortunately, John.
Is that any better?
Oh yes, yay! We can hear you. Welcome.
Yeah, I turned 62 years 2 days ago, and I think the technology of this new era has got hold of me.
So you are saying you are BBT, born before technology.
Absolutely.
Okay, John.
Victor and Solly, thank you very much for those very kind words. Yes, I think it's I've had a very, very long career working in Africa and working throughout Africa from the early 2000s when Angola was still at war, and I was fortunate enough to travel up there with a previous employer, and over the last 20 odd years been traveling extensively. And when you look at what Rob was saying earlier on about seeing the development as far as and the infrastructure that the Chinese are building and bringing in, it really is exciting to see how quickly things get done, but also very, very disturbing that they don't create any employment opportunities at all. The one in particular that stands out for me is a gold mine in Zambia, a copper mine in Zambia, and this entire operation has got a massive wall all the way around, and not a single item was purchased within Zambia itself. Everything was brought in, the steel, the personnel and everything brought into the country. And that really is the disturbing part. And when you look at what is happening in Walfish Bay at the moment in Namibia, a very similar sort of setup, and also Tanzania and Ghana as well. And it is disturbing to know that we have the resources and we just aren't being given the opportunities. And as I think many people have alluded to as well, we certainly have the skills, we have the willpower, and we have the abilities. So, we should really be given the opportunities and be given the opportunity to collaborate with those that have the resources. But also on the other side, as Solly has said, and I follow Solly very, very fervently, is where we have leaders who are looking after their own personal gain and not concerned about their countries in which they operate. And probably Paul Kagame is one of those that is very different as far as when you look at what is happening in Rwanda and what is happening in the rest of the countries. And for business, and particularly big business, to thrive, we need to be doing the work ourselves, and sure, having the assistance provided by countries like China, like France, like the UK, like the US, but also being given the opportunity to use and to develop our own skills as well. So that's really what my contribution is, and a wonderful platform as well, and a very good topic as well, Solly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Victor, if you allow me, I was in Zambia in November last year, October into November last year. Those of you who've been to Zambia recently, there's a new international airport built by the Chinese. And as you land, you see the old structure, which has been there for many, many years, and the new structure, and all of it, all around it is Chinese wording, Chinese letters, and it's almost like, well, at the time when I arrived, it had not been launched or opened formally yet, so it was like a no-go area. But you could see it's almost like was flown from somewhere in China and landed there in the middle of the night, like a parcel or present that was still to be opened, still wrapped up. It was so funny, and people said, you can't talk about that. People were like ashamed of it. It's a beautiful airport. It's definitely a much more modern airport than the one that I went through, the current one or the old one. But there was this them and us feeling in the discussions I had with people. I think I still blame African leaders. I mean, I don't blame China. China, like anybody who goes out there to look for opportunities for their own country, they will take advantage of whatever people allow them to take advantage of. It's up to African negotiators in these instances to say, fine, you can come here, you can do this, we would like you to come and do this, but this is what we want in return. And my sense is that Africa still gives a lot more to China, and maybe to others as well, than it should. That's a problem. We can't be victims all the time. We are victims of our own stupidity. We are victims of our own accepting too little for too much. It's like when you date somebody for the first time, you decide, am I taking this person for lunch at McDonald's, or am I taking them to La Parada or a different, more expensive restaurant? Now, it's up to the person to say, no, dude, I don't do McDonald's, or I don't do whatever. So who decides your value? And I'm giving a flippant example here, but the point I'm making is, if you let other people determine your value, then don't expect that determination to be higher than where you would put it if you respect it yourself.
Absolutely. Solly, one of the bigger shocks I got was I was up there probably around 2010, somewhere around there, and that was at Medupi. And when you arrived at Medupi, and I mean, you had "Welcome to Medupi" written in Thai. Wow. They had welders here from Thailand. Do you want to tell me that we don't have welders in South Africa, that we couldn't upskill enough people in this country to become top-class welders? And here you had an entire group of Thai welders coming out to invest in our country and take the money out of our country, where we do. It was uplifting.
We do have those welders in South Africa. They're not,
of course we do.
The same way that we have
100%.
awesome engineers and awesome doctors,
exactly.
But we have political leaders who say, no, let's go and get them from Cuba. When we have them here, that's the problem.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. And when you look at, who was involved in those decisions, and we have to look at it very, very closely and look at ourselves introspectively as well.
Right.
On this note, Rob, thank you so much for your contribution. I've just had a very interesting comment by Tsepang Ramusepili. I saw he switched on and then he switched off, but then he sent the text to say that we need to also address the issue of the relevant skills required locally to build our economy. Our universities are still producing more job seekers than innovators and entrepreneurs. Thank you, Tsepang. That's exactly what we were talking about, and that's exactly what we need to look at, because we've had it. We give Chinese a project, they'll work on the project, they'll give the outline, and they'll finish it faster than anyone else, and they'll be cost effective than anyone else. But what is in it for them is big and it's costly, and that is rubs us the wrong way. Okay. All right, let's see. There are no. Okay, there's also Liv Vohan also has a comment to say government should drive capacity and get rid of red tape so that private business can do what they do best. Government does not create jobs or opportunities. Business does. Corruption has turned politics into a business. We should start planting trees that we may never sit under. China has 100-year strategy. Africa looks at short-term gains, and it is all about perspective. Thank you so much for this comment, Liv Vohan. It has been great to see your face and hear your voice. Ladies and gentlemen, let me check if there are any other hands up or comments. In the absence of these, perhaps we should just call it a day. You've scored yourself some 10 minutes to get a cup of tea or coffee from the time that you had budgeted to be with us. President Moeng, if you would like to give just a parting shot on this, and we then call it a day. And we prepare for the next one, end of August.
Yes. President Sibeko, thank you very much. You've been awesome as usual. And I thank you, our guests, especially Rob and Professor Lumumba, who is always here with us. Many people don't know that he's been traveling in the US for the past 3 weeks. He returned recently. He's a lawyer, and he was called to court in the last minute yesterday. That's why he quickly said, okay, let me record this thing, which he did remotely, and it was of the quality that it is. But he's a very committed partner to the Africa Brain Summit, and Phumlani Majozi has been there for years. It really humbles me to see all these people who have been involved with this thing for so many years. Krigan also, who made a comment earlier, has been a very big supporter of this project for 3-4 years now, and I really, really appreciate him, all of you guys, and the discussions. But something that was mentioned earlier was, then what? I think, Victor, you said that we talk and talk and talk and go home and have a different discussion next time we meet, or we stop where we left off when we meet again. People know who've been involved with the summit know that we produce a report every year. We produce the reports consistently every year. And these reports will come up with these are the issues that we've identified as problems. These are the solutions that have been reported. And we give these reports to the decision makers across the continent. I can tell you that our last reports are in the presidency. They have been given to the presidency by myself, the UN, the US, not the US, sorry, the AU rather, and the African Development Bank, others that we think have influence. We don't have power to make policy. What we can do is try and influence those people who make policy. So this year we're obviously hosting these monthly webinars. We're not going to have a big event. Next year we'll go back to having a bigger event, and we're going to have to find out how we consolidate these discussions into a report at the end of the year, following the Gala Awards dinner. And I also want to say that the Africa Brain Summit is not just about hosting an event and going back home. Our ambition is to create an Africa-based destination reputation management research center. I know it's a long word. Don't worry, we'll find a shorter word for it. And the aim of it is to watch Africa, specialize on Africa. we watch Africa from the beginning of the year to the end of the year and look at the key indicators of reputation or determinants or influences of reputation. What are the things that hurt Africa? For instance, the elections in Uganda, the sporadic violent sprees of looting that happened in South Africa recently. What are the things that are positive? What are the things that are negative? How can we use that information to influence policy making, decision making for African leadership across the board? And that's where we're going. So we're quietly behind the scenes working on that kind of research unit, and it'll be Africa-based, Africa-led, but it'll also be open to collaborations with researchers from across the world, because Africa, I always insist, Africa is not an island. Africa is part of this global ecosystem, and I think we must bring something to the table, but we must also lead in some areas, and that something in other areas will be led by others. I think that Africa has not realized its potential, and I would like for the Africa Brain Summit to be party to the journey to Africa realizing its potential. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, President Moeng. You've said it all, and you've put it so well that we don't believe in talk shops. What the discussions we're having now are discussions that started at the Africa Brain Summit 2020. We unpack them during our monthly webinars, and it's a build up to what we're going to discuss at the Africa Brain Summit 2021, which President Moeng has already said that it will be virtual, but we'll go for hybrid. We promise on that one. And special thanks to all our partners, the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa, the PLO Lumumba Foundation, Travel Essence, the Don Valley Reputation Managers, as well as Crowd Product that has assisted us with the registration process, as well as broadcasting this live on all various platforms.
There's also Meet TV based in Australia,
which
is
also
broadcasting to the Asian community around the world.
All right. Okay, right, ladies and gentlemen, on this note, it's been a pleasant morning. We look forward to having you on the, when is it? The last Thursday
of this
month will be the 26th of August. It's just around the corner. And to all the ladies in the group, Wednesday, the 11th of August, we will be having a webinar on women in public relations, but looking at the research and the role that women have played in really making this profession be a force to be reckoned with. With this note, ladies and gentlemen, a great morning, wishing everything of the best. Have a pleasant day further until we meet again, 26 August, right here. Cheerio. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I suppose we are hosts. We have to see people leave. Now, no waving, nothing. You won't see your face and say bye as you leave.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, darling. Oh yeah, bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah, come in. Let's show your face and say bye. I know others are in their gowns and jammies at home. Yeah. We purposely create an uncomfortable background. All right. Cheers. Bye, Bulelani. Hey, the president, Botswana, the chairperson. Hey, the chairperson, Mr. Morero, chairperson of the Limpopo region. Great to have you. Botswana, great to have you. Limpopo, great to have you. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Kikotlai, Botswana. Yes, sir. Yeah, look at you. Look at you. All right. Let me stop the recording before everybody sees you live in your jammies. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.